Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I was a bit nervous about this one because you are a big name that I can't
That you can't pronounce. An incomprehensible
But I feel like you're super easy to talk to, so I was also very excited about this.
Good. I'm easy to talk to.
And for the audience that might not be familiar with your work, would you be able to share a little bit about who you are and how you got into the work you do?
Yes. So I've been a writer for most of my professional life, and the topics that really interest me are love, relationships, psychology, how we work, how we don't work, why we suffer. And then about 10 years ago, I started something called the School of Life, which is an organization devoted to emotional well-being. And we do lots of things. We've got a YouTube channel and we put out lots of content and all kinds of things. We're kind of home for emotional intelligence on a good day.
I feel like the School of Life was so ahead of its time. How did you decide that that's what you wanted to do and create?
I just wanted to not be alone with all the stuff that I care about. I wanted a team.
So on a personal level?
Yes. I mean, there's this sort of thing that if you've got something interesting to say, you should write a book, and that should be it. And I always thought, well, why couldn't a book also be a community, a home, a group of people pushing in a certain direction, a brand, if you like. And so we're a kind of brand around emotional intelligence. But yeah, I think, also technology is making it ever easier for people to do that. You could have your own little studio, your own little broadcasting hub, etc., which is fantastic.
But do you think that it's not quite the same as actual human connection, sitting down?
Yes. I mean, we also do retreats. We also, take people away. I agree, particularly post-COVID, it's lovely for people to meet in the flesh. And we're ramping up that side of things as well. So... yes, I think I find that what people are longing for is two things: understanding themselves and others, and then also connection. And they're slightly different things. Understanding, you could get in your bedroom just looking at a film or reading a book. Connection, you've got to get out and actually say hello. And
do you feel like we've got the balance right of that at the moment, or not so much
in society?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's striking how whenever sort of architects, planners, politicians talk about community spaces, what they really mean is places where there are lots of people. What they tend not to mean is places where lots of people can talk to one another, let alone discover meaningful things about one another. Do you know what I mean? I mean, in an average sort of piazza in an English town, you're not going to go up to a stranger and have anything like a meaningful conversation. You may notice that you're not alone on the planet, but there's a big difference between that and any kind of deeper connection. And it's a pity, because if you give people any sort of encouragement, they will go for it. They will deepen things
and create the space for it.
Yeah, but you need a little bit of encouragement. I mean, we know on trains you've got the quiet carriage, and when it says quiet on a good day, people are quiet. But if you had the chatty carriage, people might chat, or the talk to a stranger carriage. People would, whatever's on the billboard, people will tend to follow. But public space is generally silent space, anonymous space,
especially in cities like London, where everyone on the commute is just completely silent. No one's even making eye contact.
Yeah, because there are reasons why people don't want to be stalked, people don't want to be bothered, people don't want to be intruded upon. There is such a thing as intrusion. Of course there is. And so, but it's surely a balance between a fear of intrusion and a fear of, dying completely alone. And I think we're more towards, the latter danger. We've forgotten the scale of the risk.
I would say that we're a lot better at the understanding piece.
Yes, I think we are hugely building up a vocabulary of terms to describe some of the crazy stuff that we do and that other people do. And I think that psychotherapy's had a really big role in that, in equipping people with words. I do have a bit of a quibble with some of the way in which that goes, that you can sometimes feel that everybody's pathologizing everybody else, so that everybody else is toxic, has got red flags,
narcissist,
is a narcissist, is borderline, etc., etc. And these are words that have come from the clinic, and I just think they get wielded around a bit too much. And I think what I mean by too much is it can feel sometimes that by the time you've excluded every last red flag person from your life, it's fantastic. You'll have no trouble, but you'll be completely alone. so
As in, we all have our red flags.
Human beings are all slightly nutty. And I mean that benevolently, you included, me included, we all are struggling with things. And so, one's always right if you say so-and-so's got this or got that, whatever, probably you're right. But is it any use pointing it out? I mean, imagine a world in which what we're trying really to do is to manage our imperfections rather than just point them out. Mm-hmm. We're trying to work out how to live among imperfections, our own and those of others, rather than simply going, that one's got an imperfection. I mean, think of us with our physical appearance, right? Imagine if there was an industry devoted to pointing out how ugly most people are. And most people,
in certain areas of their body.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that one's got saggy. Oh, that one's eyes are a bit thin. Oh, look, have you seen that? The ears are a bit droopy, whatever it is. And we think that was kind of not just mean, but also a bit senseless. What's the point? Because we think, well, they can't really change, and it just is what it is. And so it's just inflaming people to get angry about something. And the same thing could apply at points to the psychological sphere, where again we take a bit too much to line, going, oh, look, that one's got a thing, a borderline thing going on. It's like, well, okay, fine. What have you got going on? What have we all got going on? We're all struggling with things.
Well, I also think because the focus is often on the other, especially in the context of dating and relationships, we're not inspecting our own behaviours quite as much as we are trying to give the other person some sort of disorder.
That's right. We're labeling the other one as mad, and not just mad because that's too casual. We're giving them a clinical description of their pathologies, and then saying, good riddance, and we're free now, and there's that sort of narrative of liberation, that heady moment of liberation. It's like you discover that your partner is a and then you're going to push them out, and now you're free, and you can value yourself, and you have worth, and you can love yourself. Then what? After that heady moment, what? We're then stuck in a world in which most people are labouring under various kinds of pathological behaviour, we included. So that's what we're dealing with, and I think that's the myth that Instagram therapy doesn't want us to listen to.
Mm-hmm. And in that, because I really want us to dive into relationships and love, and if we can kind of take it a little bit back, because the world that we're living in now and the way that we are dating and interacting with one another is so different from the way that it used to be, not only because of technology, but also because of what we're looking for in relationships. So would you be able to take us back in terms of how that has evolved? Because I feel like people feel this huge amount of pressure now to find the right person, but we have all of this stuff going on, and we also don't recognize that we're the first in doing it in many ways.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we can feel compassion for ourselves for the scale of our ambitions, and also the lack of preparation for them. We've set up expectations and haven't really built the structure behind those expectations which could help us to deliver on them. So just to sketch it, I mean, look, for most of human history, people didn't marry for love. They married for convenience, for dynastic reasons, because, your field was next to their field, or they had a plough and you had an ox, and that was a good match. So it was really irrespective of the emotions of the participants. And that obviously had all sorts of problems, and a lot of art and literature is pointing out the tensions of that. Your heart is in one place, but necessity in society is in another. And it's really because of this unhappiness that the modern world, which is say 200 years old, arrives at what we now call romantic love, which is a very different way of approaching relationships. And that's the idea that you should follow broadly your heart, your emotions, your feelings, and that those feelings shouldn't be interrogated too much. It's wherever your heart takes you. If your heart takes you to this person, well, that's the person you should marry. And so the narrative becomes one about sudden transports of love. The crush becomes elevated to something. You see somebody on a train, and then you have to follow them, and and they could be your destiny, etc. So a tremendous reverence for a kind of intuition. Intuition will lead you to something amazing. And that's the way we've been doing it for a while.
Which is beautiful and romantic.
It's beautiful and romantic. I've got a problem with the word romantic. Everything that's romantic is not romantic. By that I mean...
What do you mean by that?
If we redefine romantic as actually conducive to love, conducive to the maintenance and success of love, most things we consider romantic are not romantic.
Like what?
Well, for example, if you sat down with a lover that you were thinking of getting together with, and you started discussing your finances, you started saying, okay, well, how much money are we going to need to live? What do you make? What do I make? How's that going to work? This would immediately be labelled an unromantic conversation, because the kind of the ideology which we sail under is money's unromantic and feeling wins everything. So to stop Romeo and Juliet from doing whatever they want to do and asking them what's your income is highly strange. I mean, you pick this up in the novels of Jane Austen. Jane Austen's writing at a really interesting time when the older system of dating and marriage is eroding. There's the beginnings of the love way of doing it, and Austen is literally kind of poised between the two, and so she's always interested in telling her readers how much her characters earn. She literally in that says, so and so, he was worth whatever it is, £20 a year or old money, and that's for her a very vital thing. And it's not that she's arguing that people should marry for money. She's arguing quite sensibly that to ignore totally the financial basis of a relationship is foolish. Those who only pay attention to money also get into trouble. So in her novels, anyone who marries for money is in trouble, but anyone who doesn't look at money is also in trouble. So it's a very interesting thing. And we would consider Austen a bit unromantic. I don't think she's unromantic at all. She's really interested in how relationships succeed. And one of the ways in which they succeed is if someone's worrying about the money. That's one of the... But you see what I mean about
unromantic things that are actually...
quite important.
Yeah.
And another thing, that seems quite unromantic is psychological background. I mean, if on an early dinner date you started probing at the attachment style of your partner,
it would be quite effective in, knowing what's going to come up.
Well, it'd be rather interesting. Again, that could be thought of as, are you interviewing me, or this doesn't sound very romantic. But these things are cautionary. It doesn't sound very romantic to work out a rota for who's going to clean the bathroom. But once you get that done, a lot of good things can flow. And, so things like routine, money, psychological exploration, all put in the unromantic camp. But actually, these things are quite useful at fostering love.
I understand that. But if we're looking at the difference between falling in love and being in love, because I think they are quite different things. And because everything tends to be quite feeling based at the moment in terms of how we meet people, going with our heart, all the things that you said, what do you think the art of actually dating and getting someone to fall in love with you, you fall in love with them, and then we'll kind of go into the more maintenance around a relationship, because they feel like they're very different things. Yeah.
I mean, look, it's not just a friendship. Relationships are not just friendships. There is a biological, sexual basis to them, unfortunately, because it means that we're trying to do, some of the reasons why relationships are so complicated is we're trying to do so many things in them. The best friend, the sexual partner, the child,
the confidant,
raiser, the confidant, blah, blah, blah. On and on the list goes. But I think that even if we accept, okay, we're going to need a complicated candidate, the physical does have a role that I think we ignore at our peril. I mean, sometimes people try and say, I'm an intelligent person. I'm not interested in looks, or I'm not going to think about those things. Those things are lower things. I'm just not going to bother. And I can understand the sentiment. In a way, who wants to think about that? It's very counter to our higher aspirations, which is that we should give everybody their due, as mental beings, and we shouldn't consider really their physical dimensions or how we feel about the physical dimensions. But I think that's rather like saying, sleep is silly. Why would we sleep? Why would we bother sleeping? It's like, well, try that at your peril. You're going to be some consequences. Or someone, who climbs a mountain and says, good shoes for the birds. I don't need to bother. So we can be foolhardy in ignoring things. So yes, we exist partly as these biological embodied creatures, and we shouldn't and can't ignore that. And it narrows our room for maneuver. It really does. It means that, show somebody 100 candidates, and simply at the sort of biological, physical level, they'll have to rule out a huge number of those for reasons that defy conscious understanding. They'll be able to go, I don't know why this person is not interesting to me. I can't tell. Now, there is also a kind of therapeutic, psychotherapeutic sort of explanation behind this, which is that, the story goes that the way in which we love as adults is always following in the tracks laid down by experiences in childhood. So we first learn about love as children, and depending on how that experience of love goes, so our approach to adult love will be shaped one way or another. And the narrative that we have is the more that early love is tempestuous, difficult, frustrating, unkind, in some way falls short of our hopes, the more we'll approach adult love with fear, that we will think, I won't just be repeating something nice, I might be repeating something painful. And that explains a really puzzling thing about love, which is that though we think of ourselves collectively as a species always looking for love, I'm looking for more love, the songs are about wanting love, etc. The truth is much, much more complicated. A big part of many of us is devoted to pushing love away. It's kind of odd, right? We're as interested in not having love as we are in having love. It's too much of a coincidence that there are so many people whose relationships collapse, who are on their own, who, as it were, can't find a partner. It could all seem like a sad coincidence of people who desperately want love and it just collapsed. Very often, if you scratch below the surface, what you'll find is people who have been scarred by love, normally in childhood, and in adulthood have serious mixed feelings about making love work. On the one hand, they'd love to be close. On the other, closeness freaks them out. They want someone in their life. At the same time, they feel engulfed if somebody is too present. And so, we're not understanding love if we simply see ourselves as creatures who want to get ever closer to someone else. We are as interested in maintaining boundaries and distance between ourselves and others. And almost always, the more childhood was arduous and difficult, the more distance we're going to need from our adult partners in order to feel safe.
And this really, we're going into attachment theory. Or do you feel that that's quite universal for human beings, that as much as we want and crave that connection, we're also in different ways going to push it away?
Look, attachment theories, was one of the great developments of 20th century psychology. It's hugely useful, and it's now spread out into the world. And, people on dinner dates will talk about their attachment styles, and thank goodness. I mean, it's a good thing. It's a great thing because it gives people a language with which to discuss fear. Mm-hmm. Because really what attachment theory is about is that people are afraid of love. They are as excited about love as they're afraid of love. And that classic distinction between the avoidant person and the anxious person. Go one level below that. Both the anxious and the avoidant person are afraid of love. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of proximity. They just handle that fear differently. The avoidant by moving away, the anxious by getting angry and pulling somebody near with forcefulness. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing. Below the surface, there's a narrative, and the narrative goes something like this. If I get close to someone, bad stuff will happen because it's happened before.
In childhood?
In childhood.
So I was listening to something that was saying that it actually starts from when we're babies, and that we will have a way of responding to our parents if they leave the room and come back in. The anxious will continue to cry, whereas the avoidant might not make any noise at all. Do you think that it's that early on, or do you think it's more a product of our childhood experiences over time and learnt behaviour?
I just don't have the experience, but my hunch would be that whatever proclivities might be there almost from birth are then amenable to change depending on what happens. And attachment styles continue to evolve. I mean, an attachment style is really a style, and styles can be changed by experience. If you have a succession of relationships which constantly reinforce that people can't be relied upon, you may become more avoidant or more anxious. If you have a succession of relationships that enforces the idea that people can be trusted, you will develop security.
And what about sort of someone that goes from one to the other in the same relationship, the fearful avoidant.
Yes. I mean, you know, in human nature, I think we fill in the gaps that exist in situations. It's like if someone's very angry, often you can't have two people who are angry. So one person monopolizes the angry space, and then the other one has to almost, willingly or not, adopt a quieter position. You see this in families where, let's say, there's one very angry parent. None of the children can ever express their anger because the space has been monopolized. Mm-hmm. So in a functioning relationship, ideally no one should hog too much of any one position. What marks out healthy relationships is flexibility. If you think of it as a tennis court, people are able to move around the court and hit balls from different angles, and things get very rigid. If someone's always got to be right by the net or someone's always got to be way back, like mobility.
So in terms of dating and the world that we live in today with dating apps and so many people, like you said, wanting connection, wanting to find love and going out into the world, and perhaps they're really putting themselves out there, but they're just falling short. How do you think we can kind of combine, I guess, some of the perhaps older ways with today and balancing the feeling-based, the heart-led with the more rational and aware parts of ourselves?
I mean, look, first, a shout out for anyone who is going on the dating rigmarole. It's an immensely emotionally taxing event, really. Which
than it's been before?
Well, I mean, it's still relatively new. But I think if one thinks of what a date is, it's essentially an interview for the most significant role in your life.
Yeah.
And to do this week after week, as many people do these days, is very emotionally taxing because you're likely to discover all sorts of really unpleasant things. Someone you like the look of doesn't want you, hugely unpleasant. Someone who you thought might be the answer turns out not to be the answer. And on and on it goes. I mean, there are very few good possibilities. Someone who initially seems good may then reject you. Someone who you initially thought was great after 2 weeks turns out not to be, etc. So you really have to keep a handle on hope. At the same time, that's like saying you have to keep a handle on your appetite when you go in a restaurant. I mean, it's like you're there to eat. So it's very hard both to date and not have hope that the date may work out. So there's a huge... I mean, dates are often seen as an almost sort of jokey subject. They're seen as, sort of, I don't know, someone's dating. And there's a kind of carnival feel to the whole thing. It's deeply traumatic for people. And no wonder that at points people will stop. They'll say, I can't take it anymore. And I think what they're saying is it's too difficult. These cycles of hope and a disappointment are too difficult. And the chances of someone right coming along are too small given the emotional toll. And this is a very poignant moment. And, there really is no easy answer, because what we're doing is meeting a very non-negotiable human need for connection with others. I mean, this is very hardwired in us. Meets very high criteria. In other words, we can't meet that need with just anyone. Meets very limited and intermittent supply. So you've got very difficult set of features coming together. And what's more, people are quite alone with this. It's something that they undertake alone. So a lot of isolation around this. So no wonder people are sad, and you get outbursts where people go, never again. It's quite understandable.
Do you think that there's anything that we could do differently, though, in terms of equipping ourselves with tools or practices? Because I also think that people go into the dating landscape and perhaps they do have a lot of hope and they have expectations of how it's going to go, and they really like that person. They're very attracted to them. They have a lot of feeling towards them initially, but they might not be getting the same energy back, but they keep pursuing it because they're basing it on how that person makes them feel. Perhaps that person is making them feel anxious, but they're sort of attributing that to something positive because they can't stop thinking about it.
I mean, look, the overall truth is hopeful, but we haven't yet learned to capitalize on it. I believe that there really is on a planet of 8 billion people, a suitable match for pretty much anyone. There really is.
Yeah.
But, and it's a huge but, the methods of connecting people are still unreliable. So most of what we call dating apps are closer to roulette machines in the sense that they know that they are not doing their utmost to maximize the lives of those who are on them. They have a lot of information about who would go with whom that they're choosing not to divulge, for one simple reason, that if they did that, people would be off the app very quickly, and some people would leave the app because the app has not recruited the right number of people for them. So they're never going to be happy. But the app doesn't want to admit that, because then people would leave. So it's a calculated con trick, and it works for some people, like casinos work for some people. And that's why we keep going to the casino, because we've seen some people where it works.
Some people have won, yeah.
Some people have won and think, oh, well, then I could win. And but the numbers are hedged. So ultimately the casino owner always wins. And they're not that interested in, as it were, the happiness of the people who are using it. So, but if we were running the utopia, what we would do is have everyone on the planet registered, and not just registered, psychologically understood at depth, and a supercomputer would then really properly work out who has the best chance of being with whom, and the answer would then arrive for people in a dispassionate, non-commercialized way. But then we're talking about something completely different, closer to almost a medical intervention where blood types are aligned, etc. So we could be doing it much better. But as I say, the frustration that people experience is a commercially mandated frustration, and it could be avoided. And there's room for entrepreneurs, more benevolent entrepreneurs, to get to grips with this.
Because that is how people are meeting these days, and that's going to continue to be.
And look, I mean, in a way, the app world has made an enormous advance on the old world where, what was there? The party. And the party is a hugely random way of trying to encounter someone. I mean, the fact that you would, gather, someone's gathered 200 of their best friends, you're trying to find somebody who's, the compatible age, compatible stage of life, etc. By going to talk to them. The mountain is very steep. I mean, there are some people who thrive in that environment, but very many would be, highly defeated. So the app is a much better first step, and it fits in with other digital connecting tools. I mean, we now know that on LinkedIn, you'll find a much higher chance of finding somebody who's in the right industry, blah blah blah, than if you were to walk out in the road and go to a party.
Well, as in LinkedIn for dating, or
no,
in the
LinkedIn for
business sense?
LinkedIn for business. So I'm saying that the internet is very good at if you're looking for light bulbs, it was a nightmare going to go from light bulb shop to light bulb shop. I had to find a slightly unusual light bulb. You put it in, and hey presto, there's a shop somewhere far away with just that light bulb. I mean, that's amazing. That's the power of the internet to make connections over pretty rare things. And so it's no wonder that entrepreneurs got in on the dating field. But we're just at the beginning of knowing how to handle that technology maximally effectively.
Yeah, because I'm quite a hopeless romantic and like the idea of fate, which I guess doesn't really tie in to the apps. But then I was thinking recently about dating reality shows, and in a way that's what they're doing, is that they're really considering the psychology of a person. They've interviewed them thoroughly, and they're putting them or placing them with these people and kind of doing these social experiments. But what we can see is people are falling in love off the back of that. There has been quite a lot of success when you've got a pretty small number of people that they're putting together. So what does that tell us? It kind of, in a way, it's unromantic, because I think it takes away this idea that there's, fate involved, or you could argue otherwise, but for me it does. And that actually it's some producers or perhaps psychologists or whoever they have in the background going, okay, if we put this person with this person after screening thousands, we think there's a high probability that they're going to have chemistry and perhaps fall in love, and it's going to be great entertainment. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that should give you hope, because I think what you're calling romantic in this sense is something heartfelt, spontaneous, etc. And I think what we're saying is, get all the background stuff right. screen the psychology, get people aligned on, all their needs, and you will find, hey presto, that all that stuff that you like and see as spontaneous will arise. Look, think about it as agriculture. So think about strawberries, right? So we all love wild strawberries, and it's lovely. You're going for a walk, and then you see a bush, and there's some wild strawberries, and they're absolutely delicious and succulent, and you think, how lovely that nature just provides these. Then along comes somebody and goes, let's put this on a surer footing so we get more of these for more people. Let's start agriculture. Let's lay out some rows of strawberries. And you grow these things. And, on the one hand, the good side is lots more strawberries. Downside is they taste bland and kind of hollow and like cardboard. And you think, I much prefer the wild strawberries. Now, we know that neither of these two options is ultimately where we want to be, because the wild strawberries, though delicious and succulent, there just aren't enough of them. It's too rare. You're giving too much to chance, and the mass manufactured, agricultured things are too bland and too cold, as it were. And what we want is something in between. And I think in agriculture we are learning. Horticulturists are learning how to do this, how to create, mass-produced strawberries that have some of the qualities of a wild strawberry. But this requires intense scientific effort, an intense study of tastes and all sorts of things. So that gives us a model for the old world, the pre-industrial world, the world of intuition, the world of chance, had many charming things. Old buildings that an artisan just put up, and we think, oh, what a lovely cozy cottage, or a table built by an unschooled carpenter that just has a tactility that's amazing. We know lots of things, the homemade, the homespun, the chance that were great. We've moved into a technological industrial world that many of whose products seem cold, alien, unhealthy, barren, empty. And so there's terrific nostalgia. Let's go back. Yeah. We can't really go back. But I think what we can do is think deeper about how, with the tools of modernity, we can stop accepting the substandard, mass-produced, bland offerings of 20th century science and technology to aim for something more individuated, closer to our real passions. And I think, where you described these reality shows that help people to fall in love, in a way that's almost a synthesis. It's a synthesis between passion and technology. So you're not getting just a technological cardboard relationship, but nor are you having to wait around on the train station of love for a train for most of your life. And, let's not forget how many people in the pre-modern world just waited and waited and waited and died alone. So it wasn't working perfectly. It worked for a very few people, and those people were celebrated in art and poetry and music, and that's why we hear about them. But for everyone who found their love by chance, in the bookshop, there would be legions of people sitting at home dying alone.
That's pretty miserable.
Well, it's a sign of what we got our work cut out, and that's an exciting thing. There's stuff to be done.
On an individual level, if someone's listening to this and they have dating fatigue, they're putting themselves out there, they don't feel like they're getting anywhere, and they feel like it's more, the strawberries that are bland and have no taste. What can they learn about themselves that equips them with the knowledge to go, okay, this is actually what I really need in a partnership versus what I'm being drawn to because of a pattern of behavior that might not even be that healthy, or just to be better on the initial dating stage so that they don't waste their time.
I mean, look, if someone is discouraged, I think I would start somewhere slightly different. With all due respect, I would start with acknowledging that what they are doing is hugely complicated, and therefore their pain is entirely legitimate. Of course, you're feeling down. It's what you're putting yourself through is incredibly arduous. It looks simple. Oh, I just downloaded an app and just been flicking through. No, you're putting yourself through an emotional roller coaster. You're doing one of the more difficult emotional maneuvers that is possible to do in life. And so therefore give yourself some credit and, look after yourself, because it's not easy. No wonder, think, I swiped whatever left, right on, 20 people, and I had a chat, and then I got ghosted, and now I'm depressed. No wonder. Yeah. This is very difficult. We have a language where we think that's easy. It's not. Really, really tricky. So, as the old saying goes, be kind to yourself. You are putting yourself through something difficult. Space it out. Make sure you're not doing this all the time, because you need something else. You need reminders of your, legitimate existence outside of this. And that may require some breaks. As for the kind of particular thing of getting more accurate, I think what you're saying, getting more accurate about what you want. I think very often we don't tend to ask ourselves sharply enough what really it is that who we are, what we require, and so we kind of slightly like everybody, or like no one, as it were. We're not zeroing in enough on the sorts of things that seem to matter. And say the apps don't necessarily make it easy for us. I think something that I've heard works very well is for people, instead of rushing out to go and meet people in the physical space, is to set up phone calls, video calls, just not to have to leave the house until they're a bit more sure of how they're feeling about things. Because
making that investment, I guess.
Yes. But as I say, I think the key thing is it's a very difficult thing. But then, once you do meet someone, it also pays to know the questions to ask. I mean, we're talking about attachment theory. Many relationships fall apart because of certain incompatibilities in people's style of loving. And if we know a bit about our own style, if we know what kind of style would make us happy, we're going to be saving ourselves time. I mean, here are some things. At the School of Life, we always recommend that people should ask, people on an early dinner date should, probably by the end of the date, should say, so how are you mad? To their partner. And,
I like that.
And it's an interesting question, because if someone goes, mad, I'm not mad at all, what do you mean? You think, oh my goodness, okay, this is somebody...
They're really mad.
They're really mad, yeah. But if they laugh and they say, oh, yeah, okay, I'll tell you if you tell me. Okay, good. They're at ease with the fact that we're all a little bit unhinged. Mm-hmm. And, we don't need people to be perfect. We don't need our dates, our partners, our lovers to be perfect. What we do need is that they have some handle on the scale of their imperfection.
And awareness of their flaws,
exactly,
yeah.
Some awareness of their flaws. Some ability to step back occasionally and go, okay, oh God, I do know I do that thing. And therefore to prepare the partner for some of the challenges. Mm-hmm. There's an enormous difference between, saying, when you come too close, I sometimes get a bit nervous, need a bit of time on my own. That might be a hard message to hear. It's a lot easier to hear than someone who just goes, no, I just need to go to the library. That's fine. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
It's like, oh gosh, that's a defensive acting out, and the other is an explanation. And this is where, if there's any hope about people who have more and more relationships, because sometimes you can think the more relationships I have, the further I get from anything. If experience, if we're to make a case for experience, it is that experience gives us more of an opportunity to understand bits of ourselves that, every relationship should be gifting you some insights. I mean, there should be an exit interview from relationships where, someone's dumping...
Even the very short-lived ones.
Sure. Someone's dumping someone. If we could bear it, even if we're being abandoned, we should turn to our partner and say, look, I'm not going to get offended, but just tell me, what could I learn? What do you think? Because you've been around me very intensely for 5 years, 6 months, 3 weeks, whatever it is, but you've seen me. Are there things that you could tell me about me that might help me? It's quite a confronting question, but such a useful question, especially if the answer could be delivered with a certain diplomacy and necessary gentleness, but at the same time truth. You could say, you have a slightly overexcited manner, which then leads to disappointment, or you're so reserved that actually it leads the other person to whatever. And in life we rarely get feedback on who we really are. our friends can't be bothered. They, why would they get involved in, that kind of feedback? Offices, they're just keen to avoid a lawsuit. So if they're getting rid of us, they'll give us some bland thing. I mean, our parents, they just want a nice, easy time with us. They're blinded by their affections for it. So very rarely does someone say, this is what you're really like. Well, sometimes in relationships, people say that to each other, but it's midnight, they've had too much to drink, they're shouting, and they say you're a stupid idiot. That's not going to help either. I'm talking here about a really thoughtful, kindly, well-meant, but nevertheless true analysis of the complexities of someone's nature. We would benefit enormously.
I completely agree. Because also on that, I have a couple of things that I wanted to ask you, but in terms of dating and having that kind of radical honesty quite early on, where is the balance? Because I feel a lot of people, we do approach it like it's a bit of an interview. We present our best selves. We want the person to like us. So we often, without even realizing, are adjusting ourselves in subtle ways and perhaps not really being honest about what we want. And I speak to a lot of people, especially because dating is so complex these days, because there's so many different ways that people are dating. It's less black and white as it used to be. And then people are kind of molding themselves of like, oh well, yeah, maybe I could do polyamory, and like sort of trying to fit into these shapes and sizes that just aren't what they really want. So at what point should they be that honest?
I mean, it's such a good
without scaring people away.
Right. It's such a good question because, when you've been in a relationship for a certain amount of time, I remember joking to an ex-partner, gosh, if I'd said this to you early on, you would have run for the hills. And it was I can't remember what it was, but it was completely unthreatening in the context of a long-established relationship. They didn't mind at all. It was, quite funny. I don't know what it was, some personal habit or something. But if I'd said that on the first date, they would have run for the hills. They would run away.
Exactly.
So it is about sequencing things. And I think there can almost be we talked about the desire for love not to work. There can be a way in which we scupper love by giving, almost by instinct that we don't want a relationship to flourish. And one of the ways in which we stick a stick in the wheels, poke a stick in the wheels, is that we say something that will frighten the other person, that there isn't enough basis for reassurance. Because we're all the time thinking, at least one bit of our mind is this person too unbalanced, too crazy, dangerous in some way. And we need a certain amount of time to pass to reassure someone that we're basically, okay. And then we can come out with a serial killer joke. And then we can, but if you come out with a serial killer joke in the first minute, I mean, it may not
land so well.
It's not be that funny. I mean, it may not be that funny because we really, it could be a serial killer. So it is about context. But look, you're right. There is a kind of dance of honesty because, we only exist in relationships ultimately in order to be as much of ourselves as possible. We want to bring key bits of ourselves to be witnessed and seen by others. It's impossible to be at once intimate and totally private, locked away in oneself. You can't. Intimacy is the mutual revelation of one's kind of true self, and so that's going to require some courage and honesty. And I think again, a bit of experience can help here. Sometimes we're in danger of thinking that thing that's really private in me has no echoes in anyone else. I was born, like a Martian, totally alone on this planet. No one feels what I'm feeling. And I think this is something that comics understand very well. A lot of comedy is based on a daring bet that what's in you is actually in the other person as well. Mm-hmm. And so the comic will say, you know how it is when you go to a service station and ... And no one's mentioned it, and it seems a bit like, ooh, that's a bit weird. Yeah, it's true. I too do that weird thing. I do that thing too. And you think, lovely, and you laugh. And
because it's unifying.
Yes, but also it's clever that they've been in touch enough with themselves, the comic, and they've also been in touch enough with other people to know that beneath a kind of guarded, anonymous world, a lot of what's in me is in you. And if I can just bring it out with skill, you'll laugh, you'll be reassured, etc. And so dating has that similar requirement of like, okay, it's what makes people charming.
It's an art, really.
It is an art. It is an art. It is an art. It's an art of daring to think that what's in you has an echo in the other person, and even despite any evidence. I mean, imagine someone on a date who just goes something like, probably we both want to get out and go and buy some Maltesers and go to the park at this point, when actually, on offer was a slightly stodgy dessert or something. And actually they put their finger, yeah, it's true. We've been sitting down too long. Yeah, we do want to get some sweets and go to the park. That sounds really fun. It really fits in. If this were my best friend, that's what I would want to do. That's what I'd feel relaxed enough about doing. But the person has intuited that and is taking you somewhere where you'd been too hemmed in, and that's lovely. That's along the path of intimacy.
And I guess the fear and risk with that is that you're going to say something thinking that the other person has that same madness or that same internal dialogue, and they don't at all.
But at that point, you're going to save yourself some time. So there is, there is a virtue in taking a risk. Because really what you'll be doing,
and being true to yourself, really.
Yeah. How people agonize a lot about, should I call them? Should I not call them?
Yeah. And the game playing.
And the game playing.
On.
Now, of course, we know situations where, the calling really was so intense that it seemed to speak of a kind of worrying level of emptiness in their life and whatever. And so legitimately we withdraw. But there are many, many cases where it's not going to change anything, whether you call at this point or that point. It's just going to speed up whatever's going to happen. So in other words, you could wait another week and they would feel exactly the same. They either want you or don't want you.
It's not going to change anything.
It's not going to change. So I think people get too hung up on this.
On sort of analysing the texts and the wording and, if they
There's also something, we wrote about something for the School of Life on this the other day. We call it the rule of simplicity. And very often people, when they're involved in a situation that's feeling a bit complicated, and they start to do a lot of thinking, they go, hang on, they do really like me. It's just that they're worried that I don't like them, so that's why they were shy. But their shyness is not shyness; it's actually desire. And they're not calling is not a sign that they don't like me. It's actually a sign that they really like me, but they're hesitant because of the scale of their love. Now, by the time you're doing all that sort of thinking, you probably should lean on the rule of simplicity. And the rule of simplicity is very simple and dictates that if a relationship is going to work, it's going to work. It's going to roll. It's going to roll. That the shy person will just say, would you like to come out for dinner? Or whatever. And, it will just happen. And if it's not happening and you're having to explain, maybe their phone ran out of battery or, as I say,
they're scared.
They're scared. Whatever. By the time you're thinking that another adult, who in the rest of their life is having a job and talking to people, etc., that this person has miraculously fallen shy like an infant of 4.5 years old. It's unlikely. It's unlikely.
It's a hard pill to swallow, though.
It's a very hard pill, but once you get that rule, you quite quickly dismiss it. So in other words, if that text hasn't come through, fine, that's not going to work. Don't.
I always like to think you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And I think a lot of times, like when we are dating and then you feel like you've done something wrong to make them not reply or not want another date with you. And if you'd only sent that text in a different way or not called them when you did.
Yes.
And like you're saying, it's not that.
That's right. This kind of belief that you have shattered this fragile globe of love. It was a crystal and you did something wrong. And by
putting a kiss at the end of a text.
Exactly.
Or something like
that. And that it would have been fine. And that, and this is what also happens when people break up and they're sort of thinking, the partner is secretly still thinking of me and they want to get in touch with me, but they're too shy. They're kind of obsessed with me as I'm sort of obsessed with them. And it's all some tragic Romeo and Juliet thing. We can't say that never happens, but it is unbelievably in a minority. If they're not calling, if they've gone silent.
And they've actually actively ended the relationship.
And they've ended the relationship, or at least not complained when the relationship ended. Almost certainly, as the Americans like to say, they're not that into you.
Yeah, or
very
if he wanted to, he would. That's one of the sort of social media
right.
sound
Yes.
bites that goes around,
Yeah.
which I guess what we're saying is it is actually true.
Yes, I mean, yes, there's a certain kind of stoic bravery, and to just imagine that people are better at communicating their intentions, that we sometimes give them credit for when their intentions seem to be pointing in directions other than the ones we would ideally like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that's the sort of discussion around the art of dating. But what about the art of actually staying in relationship? Because I feel like they are a totally different skill set. And I think that there's a lot out there around dating. People are often telling their dating stories on Instagram, sharing everything. Like we were talking about earlier, you know, labeling people as whatever, which is problematic in its own way. But when people actually get into long-term relationships, the doors close. People don't talk about them as much because perhaps the stakes are higher. And I feel like often we don't have the tools and what's required to actually maintain healthy love.
Yes, and one of the dangers is the assumption that once love is established, it will just keep rolling on, rather than the truth, which is that love has to be kind of renegotiated, possibly every day. That a love that felt, you know, fresh at 9 a.m. may be wilting by the evening. There's, you know, we have this whole idea of sort of, you know, we can do this thing called getting married, which will mean that, you know, because of a piece of paper, love will be assured for decades. As I say, it's closer to a very, very delicate plant than it is to you know, a chair or a concrete block or something that manages to weather the elements. And, you know, love's integrity is constantly in doubt and in question, partly because there's frustration and upset that take place at micro levels all the time. We're all the time getting upset and upsetting our partners. There are constant, very minor letdowns. I mean, there are major ones too, but let's look at the minor ones. You know, someone feels a little distracted at breakfast, and that means that the other person on the receiving end will also withdraw a little bit. And then by dinner time, if there hasn't been a sort of repair of that situation, then they can grow a little bit further apart. And then that means that having sex no longer so appealing. And then the next day, because there's not been sex, and it's now been a day of slight withdrawal, etc., etc. And then, you know, these things, there's a line you can plot from that to a divorce. I mean, it really is something you can trace. And so it's terribly important to look at the minor cracks that are appearing, like an aircraft engineer that is constantly looking for the tiniest fissures in metal.
Because they could cause a crash.
Because they could eventually cause a major crash. Not immediately, but if left unattended, these are the things that will, you know, do this. So maintenance is absolutely key. Sounds unromantic? Brilliant. Because it's unromantic, sounds unromantic, it's going to be good for love. And so to go into the workshop and say something almost on a morning and evening, to say to your partner, sounds odd, how have I upset you? How might I have upset you? You know, is there something that I've missed? Is there something I'm not getting? Is there something you need to tell me? And also, you know, do I need to tell you something? You know, the other way around. The person does it back to you. Is there something I misunderstood? And this shouldn't be the opportunity for a bloodbath. And if you catch it early enough, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like, there's 7 things I mean to get off my chest. Because if you're doing it regularly, you know, and it's so...
And it's not in the moment where everything's heightened.
No. And it's so nice if someone can acknowledge, you know, if someone can go, look, actually, it's a bit disappointing. You know, the other thing to be careful of is that a lot of these things sound so petty, and that's why people don't do it. They think it would be ridiculous to mention, I'm a little bit upset about so-and-so. It sounds so silly.
Or if it's something that has happened a long time ago.
But right.
Like 8 months ago this happened, and
I'm
I've
still
been
not
storing the
over it.
resentment.
Right. And you know, I urge your listeners and viewers, if there is something like that, get it on the table. No embarrassment. The only embarrassment is to have to go to the divorce court because you haven't done this enough. That's the embarrassing thing.
I guess it's about feedback again, right? It's our capacity to kind of handle those difficult conversations.
Yes, but it's also a particular kind of feedback. It requires us to acknowledge that we can be hurt by a feather. That once we are in love, we are so delicate. We are taking off our armor. Out in the world, we'll take knocks and, we don't mind what people say. We're a good sport. We laugh along with the jokes, etc. When it comes to love, we are, our skin is as vulnerable as a newborn. Our psychic skin is as vulnerable as a newborn's. Anything can puncture us. And this is a bit hard to admit to, because it's very possible the other person could turn around and go, you're just a whiner, or like, you're so needy, or you're a crybaby. So it's really important for the couple to operate under a kind of rule that both can sign up to, which is, we are both needy, we are both small children, we are both upset by a feather, and that's the way that everybody, even Hercules, would be like this, because we're human beings. We're not unnecessarily wimpy, etc. We're totally competent adults in other areas of life. In love, we are all as vulnerable psychically as newborn children. And that's not you, that's not me, that's everybody. So we take any pejorative association out of it. And on that basis, we can then start to inquire on a daily basis, are you okay? What have I done? I'm sure I've done something. Again, the issue is not, have I done something? What have I done? The question should not be, have I upset you? But how have I upset you? Because you have. It's like, oh, you didn't knock when you came in, or you left a plate on my study table, and I've told you so many times, or you didn't pick up the dry cleaning, and I'm a bit disappointed, or you said you didn't like my friend Bill, and I quite like my friend Bill, and why does it always have to, etc., etc. And it's not that there needs to be perfect alignment. There can't be.
Because sometimes you're just going to disagree on things fundamentally.
But at least you know. And there can be difficult information. I mean, you can say to your partner, I love you, but I need to spend a bit less time with you. And it's because, I'm a bit screwed up with my childhood, etc., etc. But I need to spend a bit more time alone. And if they can hear that, wow, it's so, I want to say sexy. I mean, let's talk about sex. You want to have sex with people who understand you. There's nothing sexier than somebody who understands you and has taken the trouble to understand you. And there's nothing unsexier than somebody who seems uninterested in the things that matter to you.
And also someone who isn't threatened by your needs, whether that is space. Because if you express that need for space and they can't understand it and can't give it to you, it inevitably is going to make you feel smothered. But alternatively as well, if you don't express it and you suppress that, then you're going to feel smothered anyway.
And there are many people who, I mean, in my work as a therapist, I often come across couples who, they'll say things like, I was really upset, and, they didn't do this and they didn't do that, and I got rid of it. And then I've learned to ask a very simple and sort of naive sounding question. Did you tell them? Oh no, I didn't.
Told everyone else though.
Yeah. I told everyone else. I told my diary. And I say, oh, okay. And it's not. Sometimes they don't tell anyone else. They don't even tell themselves, because in order to register the things that you really feel, it does require a certain sort of childhood. If no one else ever cared about what you felt, because everybody was so busy doing their own thing, it's very hard for you to maintain connection, auditory connection, with the deeper sides of you. You won't know you're angry because anger was never possible. No one ever asked if you were angry. You might not know that you're disappointed. You might not know that you're hopeful. Your correspondence with yourself is stymied, is blocked by the fact that no one was interested. So we might say the way in which we learn to communicate with ourselves is because other people have communicated with us at an early stage, communicated and with our depths. And because they communicate with our depths, we are then in touch with our own depths and can then communicate those to others. So, but this causes immense trouble in relationships, and sometimes whole relationships are scuppered, and people will 10 years later realize what was going on, that someone was not able to tell their partner, and no one was being evil. They were just emotionally, put it rudely, but truly primitive. They were emotionally primitive. They did not have the equipment to translate their inner world into something that somebody else could understand. This is something we should be taught, and that young people going into relationships should really be on top of. It's like, you cannot expect your partner to be a mind reader. If you are angry about something, you have to acknowledge it with yourself and then put it into words that can be understood by somebody else.
Without it being an attack.
With diplomacy. Diplomacy is the art. We know what diplomats do in the political world. They take a very difficult message from the king. The king is ranting and raging in his palace, and then the diplomat takes that to another palace and goes, "My master is a little hesitant to whatever," and they break it down into something that's manageable. And we all need to be diplomats, whatever our professional careers. We all need to learn from diplomats because family life, intimate life, it demands it every hour.
Yeah, that's so true. So in terms of long-term relationships and sex, how often is sex about sex and sex about so many other things that are going on?
I mean, look, sex is about allowing somebody into a very inner sanctum of your life. And the more you trust someone to be delicate and complicated around your complexities, appropriately complicated, the more you will allow them in. So the breakdown in sex is always very eloquent of something. It's telling us something very important. It's telling us that there are things that are not being communicated, difficult things. I mean, which could include things like, I don't always want to have sex. But if you're able to say to somebody, I don't always want to have sex, you'll want to have sex much more than someone who just has sex without wanting to. And you'll want it much more authentically. But it's extremely hard to be honest with other people, and it's extremely hard to bear the honesty of other people. So it's a two-way problem. To really see somebody else as they are, to allow them to be who they are, and to allow them to see who you are. I mean, it's an Olympic sport. I mean, it's up there with some of the most complicated things that humans ever do. And this is the thing about love, is that we tend to think that love is democratically allocated, that everybody can do this thing called love. We don't think that, figure ice skating is for everybody. We don't think that playing the violin at high level is for everybody. We understand that these are disciplines that have required an enormous, enormous amount of dedication and work. Why shouldn't some of that be true in the realm of love? We can get better at love. We can sometimes pick up love like somebody, like a novice picking up a violin and just going, right, let me play this, and having never given it a thought.
But I guess the difference is we don't all need to be figure skaters, but we all need love.
And so that's why we all need to go to the school of love. I mean, we do. We really do need an education, which sounds, what does it sound? Unromantic.
Unsexy, yeah.
Unromantic, which is why it's good. We need to learn about love. I mean, this is, the ancient Greeks were onto this. I mean, they were, if you read Plato's Symposium, it's a philosophical discussion about whether love is essentially an instinct or a rational process that needs to be learned. And the Greek philosophers end up with a rational process that needs to be learned. And it's very true. Now, it sounds unromantic. I mean, if you said to a partner on an early dinner date, look, probably you don't know how to love, I don't know how to love, but should we learn together? Should we just get good at love and, share our learnings and become experts at this, like we're trying to learn Spanish or something? What a lovely project. What a lovely, honest admission that we might not know how to do it. How odd sounding. But I'd be keen on somebody like that. I mean, I think probably all would. It is actually a extremely generous gift to offer someone.
Because also the things that fuel the initial stages of a relationship and the honeymoon period that are based on sort of chemistry and attraction and all those ingredients that are very important and not to be undervalued, but inevitably they kind of fade a little bit, and then we need new tools or new things to kind of keep the glue of the relationship together.
That's right. We do by instinct in the early days. We get almost a gift from nature. We get a sort of instinctive first 3 months.
It's effortless.
Sorry?
It's effortless.
It's effortless. But then the question is, does love have to die? Well, that phase of love has to die, but it can be supported by a whole set of tools that look a bit unromantic, but can help to sustain those feelings. You can have some of the more boring disciplines like therapy, like therapeutic conversations, like reading, podcasts, etc., that will guide you towards, a more sincere way of loving. You'll need to work a bit harder, but the prize is that love can be kept going.
And when people talk about love, Do you think that we're all talking about the same thing? Because, it's communicated like falling in love and that everyone has like the same understanding of it and the same measure of what it should be. But in terms of the longevity of love, how would you define that? And do you think it's different for different people?
I think you raise such an important point, and it's it applies right across the board. When people say the word holiday, do they mean the same thing? When people say the word children, do they mean the same? When people say the word death, etc. So many philosophers have had arguments about this. Do words, we speak in a language and we think we're understanding each other. But actually, if you drill down, it's amazing how we manage to misunderstand each other very fruitfully. We kind of constantly trade in misunderstandings, but we get by anyway. The only people who really have a language that's unambiguous, air traffic control. If you do think about how pilots talk to air traffic control, they are so rigorous and there's no room for ambiguity, which is why generally planes don't crash, because it's like they're really drilling down into what everybody, do you mean this bit of the runway or that bit of the runway?
Yeah.
You
can't just go the runway.
Right. But when it comes to love, you're absolutely right that we're much more vague with bad effects. And I think it does pay to ask a partner, what do you mean? What does it mean for you to feel that you are loved? What does it mean for you to feel that you are in a good relationship? And there are astonishing divergences. I mean, some people will say, I will feel loved if we can sit down and discuss our feelings for hours on end. Others will go, I will feel loved if we go hiking together, et cetera, et cetera. So, we've grown familiar with the idea of love languages, but it's really love nations, love universes, that we could be on different planets when it comes to that. So we definitely need to check in on what the destination is.
Mm-hmm. And that probably changes as well in long-term relationships. What makes a person feel loved. And
this is very, very difficult and very fateful that people are changing. And the most, horrific breakups that I've seen are breakups where two people really were on the same page. And without anyone being evil, one person did start to evolve in another way. And this is something we can never insulate ourselves from totally. And this affects particularly young couples, because there's more of life, there's more room for change.
More, yeah.
You change more. So, you get these, lovely couples who meet at 20 and things are just, they have a blissful 8 years. And then genuinely something starts to tug in another direction and they become really, or maybe one person starts to want something and it's agonizing. And then there perhaps won't be a similar level of evolution again in that person's life. So the person who went off at 28, by the time they're 35 or 45 or 55, they'll have quite a stable view. But between 20 and 28, there really was a significant change, and that really did require the end of a relationship. And yeah.
And on that, as a final thing, how does one know when it's time to throw in the towel and they perhaps have evolved in a different direction and the relationship is just no longer what it used to be and not the place that they're supposed to be, versus this is time to really work on myself and for us to work on the relationship to bring us back together?
Well, I think, if you're able to ask all these questions with a partner, that's a very good place to be. The horrific things of many heartbreaks, many endings of relationships, is that there isn't a chance to talk. There isn't a chance to explore. The thought processes have gone on in private. Maybe even the people involved can't understand themselves. They're just impelled in one direction or another. And that is agony, because it's one thing to be left. It's another thing to be left for reasons you don't know. I think if you know why a relationship has come to an end, properly know. I don't just mean, I need more space when it doesn't sound convincing. If we have a proper explanation, we are spared months, years of agony. We may still be in pain for a while, but my goodness, the pain is less than mystery.
Not knowing.
Not knowing is horrible. If you're going to leave somebody, for goodness sake, do them the honor of explaining as far as possible why. Because otherwise they're going to be up, for months in the early hours, thinking,
And it will also impact
blaming
their
themselves.
future relationships.
Well, because they won't know. They won't know, well, what was it that I did? What was it that I was? Or what, so it will shatter not just their confidence in themselves, but their confidence in human relationships more broadly. So there's nothing, often the enemy here is an embarrassment. Like, oh God, it's so embarrassing, I'm going to break up with somebody. So you just want to sort of get it over and done with and run away and, bury your head in the sand. There's nothing embarrassing about realizing that you don't want to be with somebody. It happens. It's awkward, but really it's the minor problem next to the major problem, which you may be unleashing, which is by not doing it properly. So let's shift the focus away from breakup, no breakup, to what sort of breakup, a good one or a bad one.
And how can we leave well?
How can we leave well? And as I say, leaving well is leaving someone with a bearable but true explanation of why the relationship failed. The sort that will enable them to get on with reality and be free. So often people are chained by their ex through mystery, whether willingly or not, that they're enmeshed in a kind of labyrinthine structure that's created unnecessarily, totally unnecessarily by mystery. So as I say, anyone watching, if you're thinking of breaking up or have broken up, do your partner or ex-partner the honor of setting them free. And what sets them free is the truth.
It's a beautiful place to end.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such a delightful conversation. I knew that it would be, and I think it's going to be super useful for our audience. So thank you.
So pleased. Thank you.